Go for the poles and the pools. Go for the oohs and the ahs. Go for the bubbles and the bubbly. Go for the story and the stories. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Philly Sports Power Hour with Bill Colarulo on this fine Wednesday in December. Hope everybody is doing well. Hope everyone's recovering from that Sunday night loss. I'm trying to get over it. I told you yesterday my anger is starting to turn towards more disappointment as I look at this team and try to evaluate what the future looks like. So we'll talk a little bit about it. I dove into the offense. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll see I just did a video about the RPO. I want to talk about that today. I know a lot of people are asking, what's going on with the offense? Why aren't they running the RPO? So I dove deeper into the numbers on that run-pass option play. We'll talk about that. Talk a little bit of Flyers today. Tough overtime loss last night, but we'll talk about our Fly guys. We'll be joined by Kayla Santiago later on in the show. Get her opinion on the Eagles, talk a little Sixers. So we're going to jump around today. It's Wednesday. We don't have a game until Monday, so we can afford to talk about at least three of the big four in Philadelphia. Haven't really talked to any Philadelphia Phillies, but Bryce Harper in the house last night in Nashville for the Flyers game. I don't know anybody was watching that game if you saw that, but that was pretty cool. But we'll get into it in a second. Let me get a little bit of a roll call from my Power Hour crew. Love spending the hour with my peeps. Got Wine Niners Wine in the house, FF Explorer, Thunderbird, Jason 18, Bobby Murphy, MC, Chuck Hutton, Decoy Gaming, A-Track, Say No, Jim G, The Real RMP. I said say no, and he says, make sure you say my whole name this time. Say No to Fat Girls Forever wants me to say his full name. You guys crack me up with these names, man. Some of them I can't say, but I'll give you some love on that. So, guys, good to see everybody. Let's talk real quickly about our Philadelphia Flyers, because I know everybody's not Flyers fans. And I keep telling you, this team is playing really good hockey. And they did it again last night in Nashville against a good Predators team. Nashville Predators are a good team. And the Flyers went in there, and even though they lost in overtime, they dominated that game from start to finish, outshot the Predators 39-22. Their penalty kill continues to be one of the best in the NHL. But the Predators goalie stood on his head last night. But the Flyers come back down 2, tie the game, send it to overtime. They lose in overtime, but get another point. And this team's playing hard. And Bryce Harper in the house in Nashville with his son watching the Fly guys. So that was kind of cool. But as we talk about Bryce Harper, let's just transition real quickly, because we haven't really talked about this. We haven't really talked about the Phillies. And this is just reminding me that Bryce Harper has asked for a new contract, wants a contract extension with all these years left on his deal. And at first, I'm thinking, what is he, crazy? Asking for more money already? And then you see what Ohtani gets from the Dodgers, and you start to take a step back and think, wait, maybe Bryce is a little bit underpaid. And it's hard sometimes to get mad at the player because you know that's coming from the agent. But curious in the chat what you guys think. Should the Phillies extend Bryce Harper's contract? Should they give him a little bit more money right now? I know he's making a ton of money. Was it $300 million? But then you look at Ohtani getting $700 million. And it makes you think, you know what? maybe they should give Bryce a little bit more money. So curious what your thoughts are in the chat. I see Jason A-Team saying yes. Say no, yes. Jared Ford checking in. Good morning to you. Bridget Tobin checking in, loving the hoodie. It's a new hoodie. Thanks for noticing. Chuck Hutton wants Scott Boras checked into the boards. Roseman and Laurie are the problem, says no, he signed it. You see, that is one problem I have sometimes with fans, Roseman, is I'm not of the mindset that when a player signs a contract, that they need to play under that contract for the entire length of the contract. Because you've seen teams not honor contracts. In Major League Baseball, they have to. In Major League Baseball, they are guaranteed. But especially in the NFL, I was never of the mindset that a guy shouldn't ask for a new deal in the NFL because they're not guaranteed. A majority of these contracts are not guaranteed. And if you've outperformed your contract, you've outplayed your contract, I think that you are completely justified in asking for more money. I mean, let's just take all of us, non-athletes. You work at a job. You're doing a great job. You're outperforming other people who do the same job as you. Shouldn't you get more money? Shouldn't you be able to go into your boss at the end of the year and say, I've had a great year. I've done X, Y, and Z. This is what I've generated for our company. You should be able to ask for more money. Why is it any different for professional athletes to be able to ask for more money? It's about performance. So I never have an issue with these guys asking for more money, especially in NFL. I get it. Baseball, guaranteed. Baseball, longer careers. But in the NFL, these guys, every time they go out on the field, have the risk of getting an injury that ends their careers. And they have very short careers. So they got to make the money they can get when they can get it. But that's my thoughts on Bryce Harper. First, I was a little upset he's asking for a new deal, but you look at the money Ohtani's getting, may not be a bad idea to give him some more money. But I want to jump in before we bring on Kayla later on in the show, and I want to talk about this Philadelphia Eagles team. And a lot of people have been asking the question, what's going on with the offense, especially over the last few games? Where is the RPO? Where's the run-pass option play? Because I know when we watch the games, the eye test tells you they're not running it as much. They're not running that RPO. They're not calling it as much. So I wanted to see how much less are they actually calling the RPO and why. So I dove into the numbers last night, and I went back to 2021. Jalen Hurts played 15 games that season. They called the RPO 154 times. Last year, Jalen Hurts played 15 regular season games. They called the RPO 148 times. Pretty similar. So far this year, through 13 games, they've only called the RPO 86 times. Now, if you project that over 15 games, that would be 99 times. So they are calling this 50 times less than what they called it last season. And I wanted to see, well, why are they calling it so much less? When they have called it this year, has it worked? And I looked at the total yards, and it has not been as productive. And we'll talk in a second about why it hasn't been as productive. But just listen to these numbers. In 2021, I told you they called the RPO 154 times. That generated 1,178 yards of offense. That's an average yard per play of 7.65 when they call the RPO. In 2022, it generated 1,156 yards on offense. That was an average yards per play of 7.81 yards. So now in 21 and 22, you're averaging over 7.6 yards per play in both of those seasons when you call the RPO. So far this season, the RPO is only averaging 4.8 yards per play. That is a massive decline. They're not calling it as much. But when you look at the average yards per play, it has dropped significantly. And you look at how much it generated on runs in the RPO and how much it generated on passes in the RPO, and all of them have dropped. In 2021, when they called the RPO, they averaged 6.9 yards per carry. That's insane. 6.9 yards per carry. Last year, they averaged 4.2 yards per carry. Still really good. So far this season, when they run the ball out of the RPO, 2.85 yards per carry. Not good. Not good at all. You look at the yards per pass, 2021, 8.6 yards per pass out of the RPO. 2022, 8.75 yards per pass out of the RPO. This year, 5.76. Another significant drop-off. The RPO has not been effective when it's been called this season. Average yards per play is down. Average yards per carry is down. Average yards per pass attempt is down. So I started to ask myself last night, trying to figure out, well, what is the problem? Why isn't it working as effectively as it did the first two seasons? And then you come to kind of that chicken and the egg argument. Well, is it not working as effectively because they're not calling it as much? Or are they not calling it as much because it's not working as effectively? So what is the answer? And I know a lot of people were saying, oh, well, Jalen Hurts was injured. That's why they don't want to call a lot of RPOs. They're trying to protect Jalen Hurts. They're trying to protect that knee. Well, that would make sense to me if Brian Johnson wasn't dialing up straight quarterback draws. Literally no option, no pass option, no other run option, just Jalen Hurts on a draw or a quarterback carry. So that doesn't make sense to me if you're trying to protect Jalen Hurts by not calling the RPO that you would dial up straight quarterback runs. So that argument, I think, needs to be thrown out the window, at least when you look at the last couple of games. I think defenses have definitely adjusted to the RPO. You look at these yards per play, and you look at the yards per carry and the yards per pass attempt, and that significant decline has to be because defenses have adjusted. But then that is what gets me more frustrated with this offensive coaching staff. Because when a defense adjusts to take something away, that should immediately open up another opportunity to take advantage of. So if a defense is going to put all of those efforts into eliminating the run-pass option, you as an offensive coach, Nick Sirianni and Brian Johnson, have to be able to come up with a counterpunch to a defense taking away one of your plays. There has to be something that you can implement to take advantage of that. And then force them to counterpunch your counterpunch, and now you could go back to the RPO and utilize it to your advantage. So it doesn't make sense to me that we're seeing this offense struggle so much to start games, especially the last 3 weeks. And I am sick and tired of hearing about, and I was guilty of this a few weeks ago, and I'm sick and tired of hearing about people saying, well, look at the stats. They're not that much different than where they were last season. That they think the hate towards Brian Johnson and the offensive coaching staff is overblown. I disagree. Because there is no way that an offense as talented as the Philadelphia Eagles offense is, should come out in 3 straight games, 4 straight games, and put up 7 or less points in the first half. When you are game planning all week long to exploit and take advantage of defenses. They need to do a better job. They need to figure out what they can do to come out to better starts early. And the reason I dove into the RPO is because a lot of people are saying they need to call more RPOs. And I'm not sure that that's necessarily the answer, because I just gave you the numbers about how teams have significantly adjusted to take away the RPO play. But it's up to Brian Johnson and Nick Sirianni to develop a counterpunch to that and take advantage of something else. Now, I will say this. As much as Brian Johnson and Nick Sirianni need to do a better job, you cannot absolve the players either for execution. Because I went back and I watched the Dallas Cowboys game. It pained me to watch that game again. But you watch that game early, and mental errors by your best players on the Eagles offense really changed the momentum of that game early. Philadelphia Eagles are driving on that opening drive to make it a 7-7 game. 2 plays back-to-back, unacceptable back-to-back plays. Philadelphia Eagles throw a nice little out route to Dallas Goedert. He gets it down to the 2 or 3 yard line. Well, there's a flag on an offensive pass interference on A.J. Brown on that play. And I watched it on the All-22, 1,000% a penalty on A.J. Brown. He's trying to run a pick play. It is the easiest thing to do as a wide receiver in this league to run a natural pick play. Why Eagles players continuously get called for offensive pass interference on that play year after year, we've seen it way too many times. It's unacceptable. All you have to do is run your route, and you don't have to make contact with the defensive back. You just need to get in his way. You make him go around you. The fact that these wide receivers keep making contact with the defensive back, it's unacceptable. That's execution by the players. That's coaching by Nick Sirianni and the offensive coaching staff. So what happens on that play? They would have had the ball at the 2. Instead, now they're backed up. Next play, the very next play, Jalen Hurts runs a quarterback draw, not an RPO, a designed quarterback run, and Hurts fumbles it, recovered by the Cowboys. Back-to-back sloppy plays by 2 of your best players on that offensive side of the ball, 2 of your highest paid players on that team. So as much as I'm getting angry at Brian Johnson and Nick Sirianni for the game plans and the play calling in games, we can't absolve these players for mental mistakes. A.J. Brown cannot get an offensive pass interference call there. You just can't do it. I'd rather you just miss the natural pick play entirely. So Goddard picks up maybe 2 or 3 yards instead of 10 or 12, but you can't afford a negative play when you're right there in the red zone. You just can't do it. And I see people in the chat talking about it's bad coaching. It may be. That is an element of it. But these guys need to execute better. And Jalen Hurts needs to do a better job of protecting the football. Way too many times the ball's been on the ground this season. He's been lucky a few times where the Eagles have been able to jump on it. But our best players on offense, I agree the coaching needs to be better. I agree the play calling and play designs need to be better. But the players need to execute and not make so many mental mistakes with penalties and turnovers. But we're going to bring Kayla Santiago on after the break, talk to her a little bit about the Sixers, get her opinion on the Eagles. So stay tuned, guys. Hit that like button. We'll be right back.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
At Pond Lehocky, we've recovered billions of dollars for our clients, and we're confident we can do the same for you. With over 250 years of combined courtroom experience, we've helped over 100,000 injured clients obtain some of the largest settlements in Pennsylvania. One conversation is all it takes to help you and your family get back on track. If you've been injured in an accident, give Pond Lehocky a call.
They're carving them up and good play calling along the way. First and goal at the 6.
On the field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Underdog Fantasy has a way for you to play alongside your favorite football team all season long with their Fantasy Pick'em game. You pick between 2 to 5 players, select whether they'll go higher or lower on one of their stats, then do what you usually do on a Sunday, watch the games. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single game by going 5 for 5. It's a fantasy game, and the Sports Betting Show wants you to get involved. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. When you sign up, use the promo code WIN, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News?
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back into the Philly Sports Power Hour. It's Wednesday, so that means we're joined by Kayla Santiago. What's up, Kayla?
How are you? Feeling good today? A rough day for the Eagles last week, so hoping they can bounce back. And I know we're going to get right into it, but otherwise, feeling good. My Sixers are playing pretty well, so should be an easy one for them tonight, but excited to see what they're doing. I never thought that I would actually feel confident about the Sixers and not confident about the Eagles, but hey, it's 2023, I guess.
Kayla, I keep going back and forth between anger and frustration and then disappointment because reality is starting to set in for me, and I know there's still 4 games left in the season. I know things can change. Injuries can happen. You don't wish that on any other team, but injuries could happen. But as we sit here right now, I'm just going to disappointment because I can't see a scenario where this Philadelphia Eagles defense is good enough to beat teams like the 49ers or the Cowboys in the playoffs.
Yeah, especially if it comes to a point where you have to play in San Francisco. I mean, that's just an absolute nightmare for Philadelphia. And right now, you look at really the whole entire team, and I think it's not even about the talent. Of course, defensively, their secondary, I mean, they've been banged up all year. You've seen Darius Slay and James Bradbury. They've had to move kind of all over the field Do I think they're playing their best football right now? Absolutely not. But I also think that's just because they've been put in really tough situations that they might have not been put in a really long time. Their secondary is young. The linebacking core, you might want to close your eyes because it's an absolute nightmare. And the line, I don't think played the greatest game. I think they're obviously very good with Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Fletcher Cox, and all those guys as well. But the thing that upset me the most about last week was just the lack of heart, the lack of hustle. I mean, you look at this game and everybody just comes into it seeming so defeated already. You look at catches that guys can make. They're not reaching and extending all the way out. They're not making those hard tackles. I mean, Dallas is driving up the field in the last 2 minutes trying to score another touchdown against a rival because that's what a rival game is, when the Philadelphia Eagles in the last 4 minutes are taking out Darius Slay and James Bradbury. I mean, for me, Dallas in that game looked like they were on another playing field, and I really don't think that they are on paper. Realistically, in that game, they looked like it, though. I mean, of course, the defense, it doesn't look good, and it's not really going to hold up in the playoffs against the Dallas or the 49ers. On top of that, they just had no heart in that game either. So it was just a double whammy. It didn't look good whatsoever. I know they had a quote-unquote gauntlet and a lot of tough games, but you have to come out better than that in Dallas.
I said last week on this show that we were going to learn a lot about that Philadelphia Eagles team going into Dallas because I did expect them to bounce back in a big way. They were embarrassed at home by the San Francisco 49ers. So it shocked me when you're saying they came out with no heart. That should have been a game where this team was up and was ready. And we were saying it watching the game in the green room with Seth Joyner and Mike Missanelli that some of the players looked disinterested. A.J. Brown looked at times like he was not interested in that game. And you saw him make some uncharacteristic plays, dropping passes. You saw way too many turnovers by your stars. Jalen Hurts fumbles, Devontae Smith fumbles, A.J. Brown fumbles. Is there anything, let me ask you this, because I didn't get into it in the first segment of the show, and I wanted to ask our chat, so I will ask you. Is there anything that this Eagles team can do in the next 4 games that would change your confidence level in them going forward?
I think they need to win and be good on all assets. I'm not asking the Philadelphia Eagles to be perfect, but week after week, the conversation we had, especially in the postgame, is, oh, well, phew, a win is a win. They finally won a game. You really haven't felt confident about an Eagles win all season long. Now, they're not really playing a tough schedule, so even if they win out and, they probably could win out, you can say, okay, well, they really haven't played a tough schedule. The playoffs is going to be a lot harder. I need to see them win these games, and I need to see them dominate in these games like they got dominated the last 2 weeks. Because if they don't, they could get bounced out of the first round. And I know that sounds crazy, but I definitely believe that because you look at this team right now and you say, okay, well, you haven't felt confident about their defense. These quote-unquote adjustments, okay, is it the coordinator? Is it the personnel? What's really going on? Because it's still not clicking. We're not in week 4 or 5 anymore at this point. You're getting to the point of your season where you need to win games or it's really going to affect where you're going to be in the playoffs. And right now for the Philadelphia Eagles, it hasn't clicked all season long. Jalen Hurts still looks extremely uncomfortable with whatever the play calling is right now, or that's coming from Brian Johnson or Nick Sirianni. I mean, a game where A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Jalen Hurts all fumble, didn't have that on my 2023 bingo card whatsoever. I mean, looking at these teams right now, I'm not confident in them going forward because I think they're going to win, and I think they will win out. It'll be a tough one in Seattle, especially if Geno Smith plays, but I need them to dominate. And if they don't, I see them having another team pull an upset on them in the first round. I do think it's a possibility because at this point, it hasn't clicked for them. And if they're in a bad situation, in a bad atmosphere, and trying to play comeback football, it's not going to be a good thing in the postseason.
It's crazy because sometimes I say to myself, this team could win out and finish 14-3, and yet I still wouldn't have confidence in them. And I start to feel like a spoiled fan. But I said this yesterday on the show, and I said it to Mike Missanelli. I had him on my other show, that for me, when we set the bar of what a successful season was, it wasn't just winning the regular season. It wasn't just going to the playoffs. In my opinion, this season would not have been considered a successful season unless they went back to the Super Bowl. Do you agree with that statement?
I do, because I think you also look at Jalen Hurts in this situation. I almost look at it as the Joe Burrow test, right? Joe Burrow makes his team go super far into the playoffs, and then you say, okay, well, who is Joe Burrow? The next year is really going to tell who he can be. And then the following year, they make a deep playoff run as well. In my opinion, if Jalen Hurts gets bounced in the first round, that's when you start having conversations of, okay, is this guy essentially going to be the guy going forward? Not saying that they're going to get rid of him or anything like that. He's an extreme talent, but you look at this team right now and you look at Hurts and just the guys around him, there's way too much talent on this offense for what happened last week to happen, not score an offensive touchdown in the game, but to also not go out and win a playoff game. I think they absolutely need to get to the Super Bowl, at least the NFC Conference Championship. If they don't get there, I mean, it's going to be a failure of a season. And I don't like to say that because, yes, there's high expectations on them, but how they're playing right now, I don't really care about the record. The record can go out the window if they end up getting bounced in the first round, if I'm going to be honest with you. They're not playing good football. They're not playing confident football. It looks like a guessing game out there. It's a game of Monopoly when you watch the Philadelphia Eagles each and every week. You never, ever know what you're getting. And the fact the offense couldn't score last week is just mind-blowing to me. I don't care if it's Brian Johnson, Nick Sirianni, Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. These guys need to figure it out because the fact you have that much talent on your offense, Dallas Goedert is back now. There is no reason in the world that you should not be able to score. And clearly there's something going on, whether it's in the locker room, whether it's personnel. But we talked about it last week on the postgame show. Derek Gunn came on and said players are saying that their offense is predictable. Well, these players now, they need to go have a conversation with Nick Sirianni and said, these defense has figured it out. These defenses, opposing teams have figured out what we're going to do every single play. And the routes are taking way too long to unform. You look at A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts has all the time in the world, and his route still isn't completed. That can't happen. It's got to be quicker. It's got to be crisper, and it needs to be better in the season. So a long answer to your question, but yeah, I think they at least need to get to the conference championship. Now, if they lose against a 49ers team, I don't, especially in San Francisco, if that does happen, I don't know if I'll see it as a failure just because the 49ers are one of the most stacked teams all around in football. But you know, I do think it's going to have a lot of talks in the offseason about Nick Sirianni, Jalen Hurts, if they don't go back to the Super Bowl.
And I see some people in the chat saying not only would they not consider it successful if they don't get back to the Super Bowl, they would consider the season a failure if they don't win the Super Bowl. I'm not taking it that far. It is not easy to win a Super Bowl in this league. It's not easy to get back to a Super Bowl. It's just when we went into this season and we looked at this roster, that's why I say for me, the bar of success was not just simply making the playoffs or having even the 1 seed in the NFC. But we're talking a little bit about the offense. I still think the offense can be corrected. There's enough talent on that side of the ball. I still have a lot of high hopes in Jalen Hurts. My main concern with this team, and it has been now for a few weeks, and I see people talking about in the chat that this is overreacting, and I keep reminding people, what we are seeing from this defense isn't something that just happened against the Cowboys. It isn't something that just happened against the Cowboys and the 49ers. This has been going on all season long. They sit in the bottom of almost every single meaningful category statistically in the NFL. Do you have confidence in the personnel on the defensive side of the ball that they can be good enough to win a big game down the stretch?
I honestly don't, and I don't like to say that and be the Debbie Downer of the Philadelphia Eagles, but right now, the thing about this, and everybody might say, oh, you're overreacting. Well, look at the record. I get it. I get those conversations. I get those debates, but at the same time, this defense hasn't gotten any better. We talked about throughout the season, halftime adjustments by Sean Desai. He did it good against the Dolphins and good against the Chiefs. Ever since then, it has been worse, which is crazy to even think about. I mean, and it's not even, listen, I get these guys are young. I could never probably put on a football uniform and play football in my life. I understand it completely. But Seth Joyner talks about it on the postgame show all the time. They look like they don't want to tackle. They run away from offensive players. I mean, I shouted out and I gave my game ball to Sidney Brown last week on the defense because I said he is the only guy out there in the secondary that looked like he wanted to play some football, that looked like he wanted to make a tackle. In what world did I think in this season I would give my game ball to Sidney Brown? None. I think he'll grow to be a very good player, but at the same time, he shouldn't be the one getting the game ball in the secondary. I mean, these guys just don't want to tackle. The effort's not there. And I don't know if that's a Sean Desai thing. I don't know if that's a them thing. I don't know what it might be. I don't know if they need to learn how to tackle. I mean, they're in the NFL at this point, but it just seems like they're scared or the communication's not there or whatever they're going on in practice is they're not focusing in practice because they look like deers in the headlights half the time out there in the secondary. And when you face teams like the Dallas Cowboys and the 49ers, and especially in the playoffs when it's win or go home, you can't have mess ups like that. You need to be a lot better on the defensive side of the ball. And you always can't trust your offense either. I mean, last game, the offense played terrible. Now the defense was able to get a turnover, but as soon as you get past that line, cover your eyes because it does not look good defensively for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Man, Kayla's not making us feel better today.
I'm sorry. I'm the Debbie Downer today, I guess.
No, but I agree. It's reality. And that's what I've been telling the people on the show is I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just trying to deliver the truth. And you mentioned Sidney Brown, and he's one of the good, promising young players on that defense. Reed Blankenship is another one, young, promising player. Hopefully, both of those guys can stay healthy because what we've seen is the way they throw their body around, both of them are going to be susceptible to injury. They're not very big guys.
Right.
So let's hope they can stay healthy. But one of the problems I've had with Howie Roseman, and I'm a big Howie Roseman fan. I think he's done a great job over the years of building these teams. But I talked about it a little bit with Mike Missinelli. I talked about it a little bit yesterday on the show. There is a severe lack of young defensive talent that the Eagles have drafted and groomed to take over on the defensive side of the ball outside of the D-tackle position. Howie Roseman's done a good job drafting Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis and Milton Williams. But let me read you some of these other draft picks, Kayla. We'll go to what I'm not going to consider this year. These guys are rookies, but 2022, outside of the D-tackle Jordan Davis, they drafted linebacker Nakobe Dean on IR. Defensive end, Kyron Johnson. He's on the Steelers. 2021, outside of the D-tackle Milton Williams and Marlon Tupelodu, they drafted corner Zach McPherson on IR. Defensive end, Teron Jackson, practice squad. Safety linebacker, Jacoby Stevens, free agent. Defensive end, Patrick Johnson, 0 defensive snaps this season. Go back another year, 2020. Linebacker, Davion Taylor. He's a free agent. Safety, Kevon Wallace, bounced from the Cardinals to the Titans. Linebacker, Sean Bradley, on IR, but was only a special teams player. Defensive end, Casey Tuhel. He's on the Washington Commanders. The problem I'm seeing with this defense is your last 4 drafts, you don't have players that should still be on their rookie deals, that should be contributing on the defensive side of the football, and you're trying to put together a defense with a free agent here, a trade there, and you don't have enough money under the salary cap to be able to compete on the defensive side of the ball if you don't have homegrown talent. Are you blaming more of what we're seeing on defense on Sean Desai and the coaching staff or on Howie Roseman and the way he's built that defense?
It 100% goes to Howie Roseman because you look at Sean Desai right now and a new defensive coordinator comes in and it's like, okay, well, this is exactly what I have. You have 2 veterans in the secondary, Darius Slay and James Bradbury, that at this point you have to move all around and you never know where they're playing because there's so many new guys coming in every single week. A guy gets hurt or a new guy has to come in. And we've talked about it so many times. How many years have we said, the Eagles need a linebacker. The Eagles need a linebacker. It sounds like a broken record, and Howie just never addresses it. And it's really confusing as to why. I understand he loves the offensive weapons. He loves that defensive line. I get it. Those are important pieces as well. And don't get me wrong. Last season, I said I love the rotation of the defensive line because I feel like Fletcher Cox, a lot of the pressure was alleviated off of him, especially at this point of his career. I feel like he can't play as many snaps just because he's getting older. You know, his body is regressing a little bit to this point of his career. So having Jordan Davis in there was fantastic. And then you get a guy like Jalen Carter that basically fell in their lap. You say, okay, cool, this is going to be the best defensive line maybe in the NFL. But then you look behind that and you say, okay, well, offenses are going to figure this out really, really quickly. If the defensive line doesn't get to them, you know, it's an open field day for them. And I think it's just crazy that Howie Roseman consistently looks over these guys. And I've said it before. I think Howie is fantastic when it comes to trading and free agency. He hasn't been my favorite in the draft. Now, he's redeemed himself in the past few years. I get it by getting Devontae Smith, Jalen Carter, other guys like that. But before that, Howie Roseman on draft night you would have to maybe like close your eyes before they were able to make the pick. I mean, there's so many question marks you look at, Jalen Reagor being one of them, not getting Justin Jefferson when he was there at your pick. And I know that's an offensive guy, but I've always said that Howie Roseman, I don't think his skill set is in drafting guys. And you're seeing it on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, linebacker has been such a key piece needed. The best linebacker the Eagles have had in a long time was Nigel Bradham, and he wasn't even top tier, right? You look at these other guys that they have, and it's like, they're never going to win games like this. The rest of the NFL prioritizes their defense. You look at the 49ers, look at the guy they just got in Chase Young. That's going to take them to the next level. They already have a guy like Nick Bosa. And the other thing is they hit hard. They're physical. The defense is able to win them games at times. You can't say the same thing for the Philadelphia Eagles. And it really hasn't been that way year after year. They've been getting by at this point, but I do think that hopefully Howie can wake up after this season, especially if they get bounced early and it's because of the defensive side of the ball, that he says, all right, I need to make a move, because if you want to compete in the NFL, yeah, defense does matter.
It definitely matters. And I saw someone in the chat mention TJ Edwards. TJ Edwards was not a Howie Roseman draft pick, but he was an undrafted free agent that Howie Roseman picked up, and the Eagles did develop him, played great last season, played over 94% of the defensive snaps, was top 7 in the NFL in tackles, and they let him out the door. And they tried to. Mike Missinelli had the quote of the year, in my opinion. I had him on my Legal Hands to the Face show on Monday night, and his quote was, "The Philadelphia Eagles are trying to run a high-powered Ferrari with aftermarket parts." And he talked about all of these aftermarket parts that they're trying to add to the defense, bringing in Bradley Roby, bringing in Kevin Byard, Shaq Leonard, Zach Cunningham. And it's because Howie Roseman keeps swinging and missing in the draft on defensive players. We talked about TJ Edwards. The last time Howie Roseman drafted a linebacker that has contributed to this team, you have to go all the way back to 2015 when he drafted Jordan Hicks. After that, there's been guys like Nate Gerry, Joe Walker, Jacoby Stevens, you were hoping maybe could be a safety / linebacker for this team. It has been bad. So it's not an overreaction, guys. I know people think, hey, this team is still 10-3. I bleed green just like everybody else. But the reality is this defense has some really big issues on the personnel side that I'm not sure get fixed this season. But, hey, we got to be a little positive today. So we're going to move away from the Eagles because there's not much to be positive about right now. Hey, maybe things will change these next 4 weeks. Shaq Leonard turns out to be an all-pro again, and we're all saying, what a great move by Howie. I hope that's what happens.
Me too.
But let's jump over to the 76ers for a second, because the Sixers are playing some good basketball right now, and they have 2 games coming up, a home and home with the Detroit Pistons, which should be blowout wins, you would assume. But what's going on with our Sixers, Kayla?
I love what I'm seeing, and Tyrese Maxey just had a podcast with Joel Embiid out the other day, and you know, Joel's talking just about wanting to win a championship so bad, and the individual awards he doesn't really care about, because at the end of the day, he has no say in an MVP, a Defensive Player of the Year, but he does have a say if he can bring his team to an NBA championship or not. And we've talked about it week after week. Every single year, they've had a lot of pressure on them just because of the players that they've had on their roster. You looked at a team that had Ben Simmons, Jimmy Butler, JJ Redick, Joel Embiid, and then the next year they bring in Al Horford. And you look at all these teams and you say, okay, they should make a serious run, and they don't pan out whatsoever. And now you have a team that you look at and you say, okay, well, you're hoping Tyrese Maxey can almost have a superstar year. You have Joel Embiid, but the rest you kind of have to figure out with a new head coach and Nick Nurse. And I feel like they're just playing so free and so much better right now that it's just really exciting to see. They finally have depth. And I know that there might be a trade. They're at the trade deadline or anything like that. And teams are going to get better. So you also have to be cognizant of that. But right now, I love the depth of this team. And I think the skill set that these players have, especially the role players right now for the Philadelphia 76ers, Nick Nurse absolutely loves it. And Nick Nurse is able to coach that. And I think that's something that we're seeing so differently so far this year. I mean, I love how they're playing. You know, I love my Sixers. So, you know, you look at this team right now and you say, okay, it's really early in the season, but Joel Embiid's playing really well. Tyrese Maxey's playing really well. And the role players around them are a big reason why they're able to win some games. Pat Bev even said, and JAKIB Sports just posted this on their Twitter, so go check that out. If he could have started his career or got drafted by any team, he said the Sixers. So you look at that and you say, okay, these guys are just bought into this city. They're bought into this team. Having a guy like Pat Bev on your side is definitely, something that you want. You don't want to play against a guy like that, but I'm loving what I'm seeing right now. I'm trying not to get too overhyped because they do this to me every single year where I'm like, oh, they're going to go to the NBA championship. And then they end up losing in the second round. But, I'm confident in what they've been able to do. And I think Nick Nurse is the perfect addition to this team.
And I know I said we were going to try to keep it positive, but I got to ask you the tough question about the Sixers, though. As good as they're playing, and I agree with you, love the way they're coached, I'm loving the depth. Are they good enough to beat the Boston Celtics or the Milwaukee Bucks in the playoffs, as constructed right now?
I think the Bucks, yes, because the Bucks don't have any depth. I think that the Sixers can help a lot when they have depth. The Celtics don't have a lot of depth either. But I think the Celtics have a lot more in terms of talent just in their starting five. You look at Joel Embiid just having to put in a lot of work, but they've got some bigs down low as well. And you look at the offense that they have with Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown. That's going to be tough to stop defensively. I don't know. It's tough. And I will say on paper, no. I will say on paper, I do not think that they can beat the Celtics or the Bucks with what they have. I mean, when you're going up against a Dame Lillard and a Giannis for the Bucks, and then on the other side, Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown, no, I don't think so. But is this the new duo of the NBA? Is it Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey? Because, listen, this could surprise you. At the end of the day, it takes at least two guys to win. Look at Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. They didn't have superstars around them either, but they were able to have really good role players and a former MVP in Nikola Jokic that was able to win them an NBA championship and win out of the West as well. So I think on paper, absolutely not. But I don't think that you need 5-6 stars on your team to be able to win an NBA championship. If they're coached well, if Joel Embiid can put up 35 to 40 and Tyrese Maxey can also play really good in the playoffs, I do think they have a chance to shock some people. And I think that's because you just looked at the trajectory of the NBA right now. I don't think you need a million stars around you. It's just about your two guys having to play up to par every single game. I do worry, though, about 6 to 7 game series because I think at that point, when you're looking at a Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid versus a Jason Tatum, Jalen Brown, Al Horford, and Kristaps Porzingis, I think that can get a little bit tough when you're going to a 6 and 7 game series.
We're talking to Kayla Santiago. We talked to her earlier about the Eagles. You heard how knowledgeable she is on football. Also extremely knowledgeable on basketball, covers the Delaware Bluecoats, obviously the Philadelphia 76ers, some Big Five basketball. And there's a question from the chat that we'll throw out to Kayla's way from Philly 007. Ask her what's going on with Tobias Harris's consistency. Is that what you're saying too, Kayla? Has he been inconsistent this season?
He's been inconsistent, I think, since he got the max deal, if I'm going to be honest. And I really do like Tobias Harris because I think that he's a big Lou guy. I think that his attitude's fantastic. You can tell that that dude just wants to play basketball. I mean, you go back to the bubble, literally bleeding from his head and comes back in. They're about to get swept by the Boston Celtics, comes back in and says, I'm just going to play the last minute for my team, for my city. I love that mentality. Do I think he's inconsistent and worth a max deal? I don't think he's worth a max deal. Is he inconsistent? Absolutely. But I will say I'm curious to see how Nick Nurse is able to kind of rotate this lineup a little bit because the guys like Nicholas Batum and Kelly Oubre, I think that they could take over for Tobias Harris. And I don't think Tobias is going to be the guy that everybody wants him to be. We need to get that thought out of our heads because, yes, should he be a better player with a max deal? Absolutely. But he's just not that guy. He's not going to be the scorer. Maybe he can score in some games and do well, but inconsistency, I feel like ever since he's got that max deal just kind of has been what has been going on with Tobias Harris. I think that's just how he is as a player. He's a very streaky player. So I'm not surprised by it at all. I don't know if there's an answer to it. I think at this point, there really is not. I just think that's the player that he is. And could that hurt them in the playoffs? Maybe. But like I said, in years past, they didn't have depth for Tobias Harris. Now they do, and that's the biggest thing for them.
Yeah, let's hope. Let's hope. I'm not as down on Tobias as some people are. I do think that he can contribute, and you've seen it. He's not going to be, like you said, some people, because he got that max deal, you expect him to be as good as some of your better players. He's not going to be like Joel Embiid. He's not as good as Tyrese Maxey, but he can be a good role player on a team. But we'll see. I think he may, if the Sixers could, I'm sure they would love to include him, though, in any sort of trade to get out from under that contract.
Yeah, I think they would. And I'm curious to see if that's what they try to do. But This is the thing, too. I feel like the Sixers at the trade deadline, they kind of freak out sometimes and try to get a big name player. And we've talked about it, earlier in the season on the podcast. Like, should we get a guy like, Zach LaVine and other guys like that? When you talk about that, I think it's a big thing to understand that depth can help you win in the playoffs and it can help you win in the postseason. So I don't want them to trade away a lot of their guys. And they also have a really good potential talent. You look at just the NBA G League right now, and you look at the Delaware Blue Coats and their two-way guys. Jaquavion Smith, he's a 20-year-old version of basically, in my opinion, Tyrese Maxey. They've got Ricky Council the fourth, who's been playing very well in the NBA G League. They've got a lot of two-way contract guys that won't make an impact right now, but that can definitely help them out in the future for the Philadelphia 76ers. So maybe they include them in a trade deal with Tobias Harris. I don't really know. But besides Tobias, I don't want to see anybody else go on this team. I really like how they're constructed right now, and depth is something they haven't had in a really, really long time.
You've been saying that since the beginning of the season. You like Pat Bev a lot. You like Oubre
a
lot. So another question for you coming from the chat. People want to know if you play pickleball. I will admit, I've started playing pickleball. My fiance is a tennis player. She was reluctant to play pickleball, got me to play. We went a few weeks ago, and we are in. We're signed up for a tournament now. I'm looking for anything to bring back some competitiveness to my life since I can't play football or ice hockey anymore. So you play pickleball at all, Kayla? That's coming from Paul Mancini in the chat.
I have never played it, but I actually was a referee in college for intramural sports. And right before COVID happened, that's something that they started to try and do. So I've learned the game, and I know how to kind of ref it. I've never played, though. It does look like a lot of fun. And I know that this sport is actually getting more and more popular. I know down here in Maryland, a lot of programs are starting to have it. A lot of high school programs actually down here are starting to create it as a high school sport. So I think it's a good activity, get out there, get your body moving, have fun. You can't, you might not be able to play it well, and that's fine. But I definitely think you see a lot more places doing it. I cannot play, though, but I would be down to learn. I will say that.
Well, did you see Nick Foles is a pickleball champ right now?
He's just fantastic.
There? I was going to say, any surprise there with Nick Foles, man? Love that guy. Absolutely love him. Well, Kayla, I appreciate you making time today. That is Kayla Santiago. Make sure you check her out on Twitter at Kayla Santiago, on TikTok. She's always posting some great content there as well. So, Kayla, I will see you Monday night. We got another late one, unfortunately.
Yeah, we'll get the coffee, get the espresso. We'll be all good. Listen, it's going to be a tough game in Seattle, especially if Geno Smith plays. So I'm a little bit nervous going into this game. We were talking to Seth in the green room, and he said, I wouldn't be surprised if they're underdogs. They're not underdogs, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're not able to win this game. Seattle is one of the toughest places to play in the NFL. Not feeling super confident, but hopefully it's a little reverse psychology, and they can prove me wrong. So fingers crossed, that's what we talk about on Monday night after an Eagles win.
And hopefully you'll have a little bit shorter of a day on Monday. On Sunday, Kayla started her day at like 6 o'clock in the morning covering high school football. Then she had to get down the shore for the postgame. Hardest working woman in the business, Kayla Santiago.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Love being around JAKIB Sports. You guys, you all make it fun. So happy to do it.
All right, Kayla, have a great week. I'll see you Monday night.
Thank you. You as well. Go Birds.
Kayla Santiago joining the show like she does every Wednesday. But, man, she knows her football, but she really knows her basketball. So I enjoy bringing her on to talk some Sixers. Didn't get into the Flyers with her. I saw Wine Niners Wine asking if she knows hockey. I'll have to ask her if she knows hockey. But I'm working on trying to get some Flyers guests for us, guys, so stay tuned. I know not everybody here are Flyers fans, but, hey, you can't ignore them, especially when they're playing as well as they are playing. But let's take a quick look around the NFL. Some news came out last night. And I'm sure some of you guys have seen it, and it's being reported by some trustworthy news sources here that Robert Kraft made the decision after Week 10, when they lost in Frankfurt, Germany, that they're going to be moving on from Bill Belichick at the end of the season. To me, that doesn't come as a surprise with the way that season is going, with the job that Bill Belichick has done the last couple of seasons. It looks like it is time to move on. Does that surprise anybody here in the chat that Robert Kraft will be parting ways with Bill Belichick at the end of the season? Now, the article also mentions that Robert Kraft may be hoping to do some sort of trade of Bill Belichick to another team. Interesting to me. If I'm Bill Belichick, I'm done. I'm retiring. I'm going off into the sunset as one of the most successful coaches in NFL history. Does Bill Belichick have it in him to want to now go to a new organization, a new team, and try to win there? Belichick's 71 years old. He turned 72 in April. And we've seen retread coaches don't have a lot of success. After you've won a Super Bowl with one organization, trying to go and duplicate that success with another organization doesn't really work out in the NFL. So it'll be interesting to see what happens this offseason. But this is big news, man. The New England Patriots and Bill Belichick, to not see Bill Belichick on the sidelines for the Patriots is going to be an interesting thing next year, if in fact these reports are true. So I see some people saying Bill Belichick has nothing more to prove. Belichick's not going to want to go out like this. I hear you, Mancini, he's not going to want to go out like this, but wouldn't it be even worse if he goes to another team and doesn't have success there? Look, he's going to have to try to pick his destination, because if Kraft really wants to trade him, whatever organization he goes to needs to have a good quarterback. There's no way Belichick's going somewhere that doesn't have a proven quarterback, because no matter how good of a coach you are in this league, we've talked about it on this show, you can't have success in this league, at least sustained success in this league, without a good franchise quarterback. So that eliminates a lot of teams in the NFL that Belichick could go to. Now, there's one team that I could see could work with Bill Belichick, and that'd be the Los Angeles Chargers. You know, I am not a fan of Brandon Staley. I think he's one of the worst coaches in the NFL. And you look at that team, talent on the defensive side of the ball, a good young quarterback in Justin Herbert. That could be interesting. That could be really interesting. And I see people taking the words out of my mouth right in the chat. Keys28 saying Bill to the Chargers would be scary. Wine Niners Wine saying the Chargers. So we'll see. But it's going to be interesting. Every offseason in the NFL is interesting. That's why we love the NFL, man. It's not just the regular season. The NFL is 365 days a year. Right after the season ends, you got all these coaching changes. Then we start getting ready for the draft. Then we got free agency. Love it, man. Love the NFL. But like we end every Philly Sports Power Hour with a little Today in Sports History, December 13th, 1936 was the Redskins' last game in Boston. 1936 National Football League Championship. The Boston Redskins lost to the Green Bay Packers 21-6. That was the Packers' fourth championship title. But then the Redskins moved to Washington, D.C. for the 1937 season. So today in history, December 13th, 1936, the last game ever by the Boston Redskins. Guys, I appreciate all of you spending this hour with me. I do appreciate that you take this time. It means a lot to me. I have a lot of fun spending this hour with my Power Hour crew. Go ahead, hit that like button, hit that share button. Make sure you're following me on Twitter and Instagram and any other social media platform. And if you want to hear the show I did with Mike Missinelli, you can head over to any of the podcast platforms. Legal Hands to the Face. The audio is up on all the platforms. Guys, I will see all of you tomorrow, 10 o'clock, right here on the Power Hour. Have a great day. And as always, go Birds.
Go for the poles and the pools. Go for the oohs and the ahs. Go for the bubbles and the bubbly. Go for the story and the stories. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.